Okay, you can edit this down as well. I'm here with Michael Matheson, Minister for Public Health in the Scottish Government. Michael and I have just met to discuss the outcomes of the 3rd Scottish Assembly for Tackling Poverty, and we're just going to hear from Michael now on some of his views on what he's heard so far. So, Michael, we've talked a bit about some of the discussions that have taken place at the Assembly. What for you are the key dimensions of tackling poverty in Scotland?
I think the important thing I take from the message that I've heard from the outcomes that have been identified at the Assembly is the way in which community has an important part to play in dealing with issues around poverty, and a big part of that is about making sure that communities have the capacity to take on some of the challenges that they actually face directly. But the other part from a national government point of view is that we have to make sure that we put measures in place at as early a stage as possible, so that children get the support and assistance, and that their parents get the support and assistance necessary in order to close down some of the real inequalities that still exist within our society. So it's about helping to support and sustain communities, but within that also helping to make sure that support is very much targeted at those who are at greatest risk of falling into poverty or being exposed to poverty, and providing them with the support and assistance that's necessary to try and either lift them out of that situation or to avoid getting into that situation in the first place. And the challenge we have as a government here in Scotland is trying to make that happen and to work with all the different interested organisations who've got a role to play, because as government it'd be foolish of me to say that we have all the answers and we have all the solutions. We can make an important contribution towards it, and there's no lack of effort on our part to do that. But what we also need to do is work with partners who can assist us in delivering on some of this agenda at a local level.
And one of the big discussions at the Assembly was around welfare reform. Could you maybe just tell us a little bit about what the Scottish Government is doing to gear up for welfare reform and the impact that it might have in Scotland?
Well, there's very few meetings that I attend as a minister or even as a constituency MSP when I'm meeting with, whether it be carers, local community groups, where the issues and concerns around welfare reform don't come up. And we as a government are very acutely aware of the concerns that many people have about the potential impact that welfare reform can have on them as an individual, but also the impact that can then have as a community because of the way in which they're going about some of these changes. And what we've been doing as a government is having dialogue with the UK government to express our areas of concern about the way in which they're taking forward some of the welfare reform agenda, where we think they're going wrong, and a number of ministers have been involved in that dialogue with UK ministers. What we're now in a situation is that we now have a welfare reform committee established in the Scottish Parliament who are going to be responsible for scrutinising the areas around welfare reform that are going to be devolved to the Scottish Parliament. And the Poverty Alliance are actually going to be involved in helping to create some dialogue around how we shape the provision that we will become responsible for. So there are a number of different elements to this. Working with the UK government, trying to make better where we think they have got some of these things wrong, but we're dependent on them reacting to this and responding to it. We'll continue to express concern where we are unhappy at the approach they're taking, but also making sure the areas that are devolved to the Scottish Parliament, that we make sure that they work in the way in which they're intended to support people with the greatest need. And in order to achieve that, the best way for us to go about doing that is to work with local organisations who can assist us in delivering on it. So it's an area I'm very aware that causes a lot of anxiety for people, but as a government we're acutely aware of that, and we'll continue to do what we can within the areas that we're competent for.
And just finally, Michael, one of the things that we did at the end of the Assembly this year was we asked people to fill in little postcards, or to make from the politicians on the panel, to make a commitment about what they would be doing, what their priority would be for tackling poverty in the year to come. Now obviously you have a whole portfolio that helps tackle poverty, but what for you would be your final priority, the thing that either as a constituency MSP or in your role as Minister for Public Health that you would want to take forward?
Well, from a constituency point of view, one of the things that I'm very keen to see happening and developing more in my constituency are social enterprises that can help to tackle some of these inequalities that exist within our society. And I've been working with a number of our councils to try and help to support local community groups who could help to develop social enterprises to allow, whether it be taking control of assets in the local community or whether it be setting up particular services and facilities that could be utilised and that the community could benefit from. And there are some very good examples of organisations starting that whole process. So I'm very keen to see social enterprises move up a step within my own constituency area, because I think they can have a very important part to play in enabling and in supporting communities and helping to tackle some of the inequalities and poverty that exist there. At ministerial level, one of my responsibilities as Minister for Public Health is to try and address some of the real ingrained health inequalities that we still experience as a society over a whole range of different issues, where between a couple of constituencies in areas in the west central belt of Scotland, you can have life expectancies that vary by 20 plus years. And there's a lot more for us to do there, and what we have to do is get much more focused on how we can support local health services that are working within individual communities to help to support and identify individuals who are at greatest risk of their health being affected through inequality. So what we're doing at a government level is looking at some of the programmes that we have in place at the present moment to see whether we can actually give them even greater focus, because we need to make sure that we close some of those health inequalities. And if we're going to do that, we need to make sure that we deploy the resources we've got targeted at the individuals who very often are least likely to make access to the services that we already provide. So I'm determined to try and make sure that we close down some of these health inequalities. It'll be long after politics, or when I'm out of politics, before we actually realise some of that, but we're certainly determined to make sure that our policy gives direction to that, and it does actually start to make a real difference to people on the ground.
That's great. Those are very welcome commitments, and we thank you again for your support of the Assembly and all the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.